This is Francesco Abbruzzino with the Uncensored Report. Okay, guys, a new report came out, and I thought it was pretty interesting. It's something I cover a lot, and it's in regards to the overall basic needs of humanity out there, of the normal, everyday Tom, Dick, Jerry, Sue, Jane, Elizabeth. And that's that 51 million households out there in the United States. 51 million. Just let that sink in for a second. That's a lot of people, folks. But they cannot afford basic rent and food. So how are they doing it? This is a new report. It came out. It's by the United Way Alice Project. It shows the gap, what they call the wealth gap, between the poor, the elitists. And you have to ask yourself how they're doing it. What's impacting it? You know, I read this one article and they went into housing pricing, which we'll cover in a second. But one of the things it didn't cover is something that I've been covering for years, is that thing that they say we don't have, which is inflation. You know, my wife went to the store the other day, and she came back and she's like, "This is ridiculous. I hardly got anything. Look at this bill." I'm like, "I know what you're saying. I've been saying this for years." And basically, the way it was explained to me by a financial guy was that they'll take, let's say there's 30 variables out there to determine if there's inflation. They'll cherry pick let's say the 5 best ones that will get the number that they want to put out there. And they'll say there is no inflation. But people don't realize that, and they don't dissect into the numbers. You see that a lot on different things. I was driving down the street today on the road. And I was looking at this nice brand new road on Lucaya, all nicely paved and everything. And I started reflecting upon the fact that it's cost this city where I live $18 million to go out, and they said basically we're going to pave the roads. I was one of the few that dissected it. I knew every road wasn't going to be paved. I know that the county owns certain roads like Pine Brook or Venice Avenue. They weren't going to get paved. But they put it out in very general terms so that the general populace, the dumbed-down public, the dumbed-down citizenry will not realize, will not ask questions, and they'll think, "Oh, wow, 18 million, we're getting them all paved. I'm going to have a brand new, nice Venice Avenue. No more bumps. Gotta hate going through that light heading east." But it's not that way. And, you know, so they finished a project like a month ago or something like that. And what I was doing was driving down the road looking and thinking, what the hell did we get for $18 million? Most of it was on the island. But I got sidetracked. Back to this report. People aren't looking. They're not asking the right questions. So you got this gap between the wealthy and the poor. They say it's the biggest that it's ever been in a lifetime. I think I put out something the other day where they covered how transparency was lacking at the committee levels at Congress. And I think it was back in the early 70s where they said, okay, we're going to allow transparency and allow the press and lobbyists essentially to come into these committees. Once they did that, the doors were no longer closed and the politicians couldn't push through their agenda because they had the lobbyists that's control them or the media right there. And that's essentially when you got that big tax break from the wealthiest, where they got this huge tax break, if you look at it compared to where it was in the 70s to now. And that contributes to that wealth gap. They talked about houses selling for in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And you see it here. I'll go on. I'm going to reference Venice. And you'll go on the island, and houses that maybe are worth $200,000, if that, are selling for $500,000. And when you got stuff like this, when you have inflation, when you have home prices that are skyrocketing, you're going to have the poor, the working poor, that can have to continue to work. They put out something that's saying that in Sarasota County, that's where I live, that the average family of 4 can only need something like, I think it was $82,000 to survive, but they had rent at $1,300. And I'm thinking, where the hell are you finding rent for $1,300 for a family of 4? Even in the ghetto, I don't know if you can get rent for that much. And it's just crazy. So most people, they can't afford monthly the budgets for rent, for food, for childcare, for healthcare, for that matter. Healthcare is through the roof. I think I covered before where I said I was grandfathered in on my plan that I had 2 years prior to Obamacare. And I'm lucky. I'm only paying like $550 a month, but I have a $10,000 deductible, which is ridiculous. But when I looked into Obamacare, it would have cost me something like $1,500 a month. And so all these things are adding up. 51 million households. That's 43% of the households in the United States cannot afford rent and food. The basics. And that's the true state of this economy. They say it's going well. They say the jobs are going well. They say the economy is just cooking along, which I don't know. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's not. I don't believe a lot of numbers that they put out there. But if you just look at the jobs, 66% of all jobs pay less than $20 an hour. And the average person can't last on $20 an hour. I think when I went through and looked at that $82,000 to live in Sarasota County, it basically came out that a husband and wife would have to make something like $24 an hour. And the most people, I have to tell you, are in Florida are around $15 an hour. It's hard to find too many that are up that high. Many Americans are out there and they're forced to work not just one, but two, and in some cases 3 jobs. The housing cost accounting for the largest cost that's out there. People laugh when individuals write me and say, hey, I need to find a house for a single mother, family of 2 or 3. For $800, and people are like, what are you high? Are you crazy? You're never going to find that. And they continue to soar. I read an interesting article because these numbers just came out, and it said that basically there's this big rush now to purchase houses because the interest rate, the mortgage rate, fixed rate is up to 4.61%, which is the highest it's been since 2011. And that brings in another factor. What you're seeing is a lot of resemblance to back in 2008 during the meltdown with the mortgages. Because the rates were so low and the housing prices were so high back then as they are now. So people were going in on these adjustable rate mortgages so that they could afford to buy a house. With those adjustable rate mortgages, as the insurance rates go up, so does their rate. And so this article opined that a lot of people are trying to sell their houses now, A, to get that top-notch price before the market crashes, and B, because the ARMs are going up so high, they can't afford it. And many financial gurus are out there saying this is prime for 2008 all over again. Because we're witnessing the same patterns that took place. With the housing prices being so obscene, the ARM rates. You know, some people say, well, move away, go find somewhere else. You go out and tell a family that can't afford basic housing and food to move somewhere where it might be cheaper. Do you think if they have the money, if they don't have the money for housing and food, do you think they're going to have the money to get up and move out of state or somewhere else where it might be cheaper, where they don't have a job? They just don't have that option. I was reading another article that covered these numbers too, and they talked about Pope Francis and how he came out. It was real strange. He said this yesterday, and he said that basically the dangers of derivatives and that they're the devil and all that stuff. That's a ticking time bomb, I believe is what the Vatican called it. And he's right. He's correct. Once we see what happens with those derivatives, this ticking time bomb, it's going to devastate the financial community when it goes off. So what will happen then? And you see all these different financial crisis points approaching. Are we prepared mentally, physically, financially? Most people aren't. Most of the population is asleep, and they're going to be blindsided by this crisis when it finally arrives. Sad day of affairs. So what say you on this? This has been Francesco Abbruzzino with the Uncensored Report.